Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about periodic table of elements. Now the learning objective of today is, what is periodic table? How are elements arranged in a periodic table? What are metals and non-metals, and how are they related to this specific table? And what is valency electrons, and how are they related to the periodic table? Now let's take a look. Okay, here is a picture of a huge library. You can see that there's many books in this library. When we go to the library, we often find out that the books are arranged in a certain way so that it's easy for us to organize it, it's easy for us to go find them. Sometimes they're organized in terms of authors. Sometimes you can find them in terms of genre, for example, whether it is romance or it is science fiction. And sometimes they're arranged in alphabetic order. And now everything in the universe, just like this shoe or this dog, are made up of similar types of things, which are called atoms. Atoms are like building blocks of everything, just like we use author names or alphabetic order to classify all the books. We use something called proton number as well as the behavior of the elements. Now, the elements are made up by three different things. In the inner part of the elements, there's one thing called proton, the other one called neutron, and on the outermost part, something spinning around are called electrons. Now, we made an analogy before. We talk about proton is like who you are, right? You can now change who you are, and it determines how you behave, how you interact with other people, what you like, different things like that. Neutron is like your flesh, right? If you eat a chocolate, if you had a gourmet meal, you may gain a little weight. You may have a little more neutron, or different things like that. Some people may have a little more fat than some other people, but it doesn't really matter that much. An electron is like your clothes. You can change your clothes every day. You can gain your clothes. One day you go to the swimming pool, some monkey steal your clothes. You can lose your clothes as well. It doesn't even matter that much either. But the most important one, I think, are like protons, because they determine who you are. That's why in this periodic table, we arrange all the elements based on their proton number. As you can see that on this periodic table, there's two parts of the periodic table. So the first part is the group. The vertical way are the group, and horizontal way, we call it the period. The one way easy to remember is horizontal period. The first letter of both words are H and P. So the famous movie and book Harry Potter, right? HP, one easy way to remember it. Now you can take a look at all the numbers on each of the elements. They have been arranged in an increasing way, right? So the first element is our hydrogen. It's been placed in the first group and first period, and helium has been placed in the number 18th group and the number 2, and still on the number 1 period. And goes on and on. One special part about the periodic table is that there are certain blocks on the periodic table. So for example, as you can see that on the left part of the periodic table, if we use all these red zigzag lines or the red zigzag blocks to separate the periodic table into two parts, on the left part is our metals, and on the right part is our non-metals, and the middle part is also called transition metals. So you can see, except for hydrogen, which is quite special. We're going to talk about hydrogen later on. So if you take a look at the periodic table from the perspective of a period, let's take a look at period number 2. So you will go have one metal, and then metalloids, which is in between metal and non-metal, and then you have non-metals. Same thing goes on to the next period. So you will have 3 metals, and then metalloid, and then non-metals. So the periodic table are arranged in another way. That is, the metals are usually on the left side, and the transitions into metalloids, and then transition into non-metals. The third part that we're going to talk about is something called valence electrons. Now here's one picture that shows the electron arrangement of an atom. Okay, so you can see there's 10 dots here of this neon. The 10 dots kind of shows the electron arrangement, or in another word, how are electrons being placed, how our electrons are located in this element. You can think of all these dots as the parking spot for the electron in neon atom. So in the first inner circle, you will have 2 parking spots for 2 electrons. And then on the outer circles, there are 8 parking spots for the rest of the 8 electrons that neon have. Which means that on the outermost part, those electrons are called valence electrons, or in another word, valency electrons, based on what resource that you looked at. So one special thing about the periodic table is that we classify the elements based on its proton number, and the second thing is based on its behavior. Just like us human beings, we will react, we'll behave certain ways. If we transfer that knowledge into elements, they will behave different ways too. When we look at it, it looks like their chemical and their physical properties, they will behave differently. So now, on this periodic table, which shows all the electron shells of the element, we find out that when we arrange all these different elements into how they behave and the proton number, they're actually having the same electron shells in the same group. So for example, in the group 1 element, they all behave similarly, and later on we find out, oh my gosh, they actually have the same valence electrons, meaning the same number of electrons on the outermost shell. They all have 1 electrons on the outermost shell. Same thing with group 2 elements. They all have similar properties. This same thing goes on and on into all 18 groups. So we find out the valence electrons is actually determines how the elements behave, which is understandable. Just think about it as 2 girls walking down the street wearing the same outfit. They might look differently. There must be something similar about them that they choose to wear the same clothes. Same thing with valence electrons. All the elements that have the same valence electrons, they will behave differently, and we place them in the same group. Now we go back to our learning objective. Make sure you can answer all these 4 questions. First one, what is periodic table? Second one, how are elements arranged in a periodic table? Third one, what are metals and non-metals, and how are they related to the periodic table? The last one but not least, what is valence, another word, valency electrons, and how are they related to the periodic table? Thank you very much, and see you folks next time.